Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şrah li sadri ve yessir li emri ve ehlul ukdeten min lisani yefkahu kavli. Selamünaleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuh. Inshallah we are continuing 22nd word, second station, and ninth flesh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are continuing on from page 311 of the 22nd word, ninth flesh. We have pointed out some of the seals, stamps, and signatures on particulars and parts. We have pointed out some of the seals, stamps, and signatures on particulars and parts, universals and wholes, on the world as a whole and on life, on the world as a whole and on life, living beings and raising to life. Now, we will indicate one of the countless stamps on species. We shall indicate one of the countless on species. So we have pointed out some of the seal on particulars and parts, universals and wholes, on the world as a whole and on life, living beings and raising to life. Now we shall indicate one of the countless stamps on species. Since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, the difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. Since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, the difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. It is so easy. The numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. It is so easy. The numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. That means in regard to quantity, multiplicity, numerous centers necessitate the difficult expense and equipment of the whole tree for a single fruit. It is so easy. The numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. In regard to quantity, multiplicity, and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty, expense, and equipment of the whole tree, a single fruit.
Let me read from the second paragraph. Since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center, in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, the difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. It is so easy. The numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. That means in regard to quantity, multiplicity, and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty, expense, and equipment of the whole tree for a single fruit. In regard to quantity, multiplicity, and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty, expense, and equipment of the whole tree for a single fruit. The difference is only in regard to quality. Like all the factories required for the whole army are necessary to manufacture all the military equipment necessary for a single soldier. That is to say, if the matter passes from unity to multiplicity, in respect of quantity, the difficulties increase to the number of individuals. Thus, the extraordinary ease to be seen clearly in all species is the result of the ease and facility arising from unity. Okay, let me read the second part a little bit because of the difference between quality and quantity is making. So that means in regard to quantity, multiplicity and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty, expense, and equipment of the whole tree for a single fruit. So that makes sense, yes. But the difference is only in regard to quality. Like all the factories required for the whole army are necessary to manufacture all the military equipment necessary for a single soldier. That is to say, if the matter passes from unity to multiplicity, in respect of quantity, the difficulty increases to the number of individuals. Thus, the extraordinary ease to be seen clearly in all species is the result of the ease and facility arising from unity. In short, the conformity and similarity in basic members between all the individuals of a species and all the species of a genus prove that they are the works of a single maker. Because the unity of the pen and oneness of the seal require this. The conformity and similarity in basic members between all the individuals of a species and all the species of a genus prove that they are the works of a single maker. Because the unity of the pen and oneness of the seal requires this. Similarly, the observable absolute ease and lack of difficulty require, indeed necessitate, that they are the works of one maker. Otherwise, difficulties rising to the degree of impossibility would doom the genus and the species to non-existence. To conclude, if all things are ascribed to Almighty God, they become as easy as a single thing. Yeah. If all things are ascribed to Almighty God, they become as easy as a single thing. While if they are attributed to causes, they become as difficult as everything. Since it is thus, the extraordinary profusion observed in the universe and the boundless abundance before our eyes display a stamp of unity like the sun. If these fruits which we obtain in such plenty were not the property of the single one of unity, we would not have a single pomegranate to eat, even if we gave the whole world for it. So that is the 9th flash. So my first comments on this 9th flash, basically, so he was saying that in the previous flashes, he was talking about all the seals and the stamps, basically everything that we were seeing, everything in existence is pointing out to something. So everything is acting, can be seen as something that has a signature on it. So you would question, basically, I think he explained it in his previous flashes, that everything in their pure existence shows that they are made by something, which is everything has like a signature that says that I have a maker. So that's, or you can say that that's a seal or a stamp. So he went in his examples from particulars to parts, as he says, like even the smallest thing, like a particle versus, you can look at the planets or the galaxy or the whole universe. Everything shows that there is a seal or a signature that says that it cannot exist by itself, but it must have a maker. So now he's saying, he's indicating one of the, further elaborating on the stamps on species, he calls it. I don't know exactly what, because what he actually implies by saying species. So it would be, again, every thing that we are seeing in terms of, yeah, in his previous flashes, as he was explaining. But here the author gives the example of the countless fruits that we see that are on a tree. If one is to wonder and question where those, like what these, how these fruits are coming, from the tree, or what is going on. How does the tree, is it the tree that knows about it, who is administering? Because there's so many fruits that, in abundance, as he says about the multiplicity, and how are they being managed? How are they being administered? So it's much easier if you have a single being in charge of administering a place. For example, like in companies, it's much easier if you have one, mind or one individual who can lead the organization versus many minds who want to direct the organization in a particular way. Then there will definitely be, a mismatch in terms of different ideas being thrown in to manage the organization. But so in the similar fashion, in the way the universe is being administered, it's much easier to appoint it to a single source of existence. And then he says that further builds on the paragraph. It is so easy, the numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. So the way that, if one looks at the way things are coming into existence, the multiplicity, the administration, it shows that they seem to be coming with real ease because they're existing and everybody is able to observe and see them. So, I mean, it makes it like the way they're coming shows that, yeah, they are coming, but if anything in the universe, like a human being included, the smart human beings, can they give existence to anything? I don't think so. There's no sign of that. And looking at all these little, individual things and all these multiple things that are coming in, all the different kinds of flowers, the birds, the insects, animals, humans, they're existing, they're coming, and show the sign that whoever is bringing them into existence must be all powerful, must be all knowledgeable, and must be really easy for that individual. Because for me as an individual, just to move, let's say, boxes from one place to another, even though there might be multiple boxes, it's not something that is an easy task, right? So just a small action of movement is not something that is easy. But the way, if you talk about existence, it's a whole different matter, whole different world that takes tremendous amount of all the qualities that you can imagine in terms of power, knowledge, wisdom, to bring in something into existence. And if something is coming like that, it shows that whoever is bringing them must be really easy for that being. So that is my quick, short take on this, but definitely I will pause here to hear from you all.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you for reading, and then your comments, and Feria as well. Your reading was much better, of course. So thank you. So anyone who wants to take the lead, maybe start from the beginning. Feria, please go ahead.
So I have a question. So starting off from the first paragraph, and Asim kind of elaborated a little bit, but it's a good jumpstart. So how everything, the author starts us off, everything has some kind of stamp, seal, right? on particulars and parts. I know he kind of breaks it down with parentheses. Like, can someone help me or just give an example between particular and parts, universals and wholes, on the world as a whole, and on life, living beings and raising to life? I don't know, maybe the author is just like pinpointing the different variations of things we see, but it's essentially pointing to the same matter, as in macro to the micro, or the micro to the macro level. I just was curious about that.
So if anyone has an idea, please go ahead. Otherwise, I have some ideas, but I'm sure the others will have better answers. Mohammed, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to talk to the point that Feriha brought, was thinking about the same, to understand the first paragraph. And I think my perception of the universe is, or consists of such definitions. Maybe I'm not sure if I'm using the right word to say what I am trying to say, but like the particulars, that's something that I perceive, or parts, or wholes, or death, or raising to life. These are the things that I call reality, right? Or that is something that I call existence. These are all existing things that I am aware of. That's what I got from the first paragraph.
Anyone else? Again, regarding these particulars, universals. Mohammed, please go ahead.
Sorry, it was a mistake.
Okay, no problem. So the way I understand is, the author is saying that up to this point, we studied different flashes or seal stamps of divine unity as manifested in individuals. For instance, in some of the examples he was talking about, let's say a bee, an individual bee, or some particular example of something like an apple. He was saying that, look at this apple, you will see this and that. And then he also talked about the apples as a whole, all apples in the creation. He talked about the species, for instance, not only about the bees, but species of bees. So this is what I understand from this sentence. Like, when you look at individuals, you will see flashes of divine unity. When you look at their families or their species, you will see another kind of flashes of divine unity. So whether you look at the micro level or macro, you will see different flashes of divine unity at different scales. This is what I understand from the first sentence. Any other ideas? Okay. Asim, please go ahead. And yeah, please go ahead, Asim.
Yeah, so as you were saying about the species going into basically as he says, countless stamps on species. So everything that you're seeing, I think he's going into the multiplicity part, basically. Like, you just don't see like a particular thing, but you see them, they are like in multiples. Like, so they're all spread out, and there are a lot of them. Right, so that's why he says countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree. So he's looking at the numerous different beings. Like they are in the previous one. I remember he was saying everything looks alike. He was going into the, how things, by looking at their sameness, their similarity, they point to that they must be coming from the same source. So now he's looking at the stamps based on how you can see what the multiplicity shows. So by examining all the different varieties of every being, what does that show? What kind of stamp is that bringing?
Maybe another point, like I think it's important that author is separating them, like talking about the particulars and, let's say, individuals, and then universals or the species separately, because so when you go from individuals to species, this flashes or proofs of divine unity. It's not just multiplied by the number of members. You see another kind of evidence, another kind of flash of the divine unity when you look at these species. I guess you can think it as, like, you can talk about my organs separately or my limbs separately. Each will tell you something about the creator. But as a whole, they would say something else, as they say, like more than their sum. So studying the creation at these different levels is really important, because as you move from lower level to higher level, new qualities emerge and new flashes emerge which are not existent in individuals. So it's not just, you put together 3 individuals, then you have 3 times the same quality. When they become a group, they represent another quality now. So it's important, I guess, the way that the author is studying at different levels. So for instance, being a human is only, or being a person is only true when all these limbs come together in a specific way. So when you look at my finger, Birkan is not there. But as a whole, when you look at it as a whole, you will see the person, which is totally different existence, totally different quality than some of my parts. So we can continue. Yeah, Naz Hassan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. The question, so you spoke about studying creation at different levels. Now that seems a little bit easier to do for, let's say, the finger compared to the body, right? But like, is it really possible for us to, get a knowledge of, like, let's say, us and the earth, right, at that scale, or us and the universe? Like, aren't we generalizing at some point? And isn't there like a ton of stuff that we don't really know?
So personally, I'm not sure I get the question correctly, but if anyone else?
Well, what I'm trying to say is basically, so the argument is that, if you look at our creation, and if you look at how we fit into the bigger picture, right, then that that the individual creation has a creator that's wise, correct? But at some point, isn't it possible that we can't really get that bigger picture? Like, do you think that it's ever possible that we can get a bigger picture of the world and the universe to make that conclusion that,
So there's one comment from Mohammed. He says, no end to knowing. He said,
so I think your first point was, since now we are studying ninth flesh, is the author just repeating himself, or he is just increasing the number of examples of the same type, or is he showing us different aspects? So because initially the author was talking about parts, and now he's talking about more like collective personalities, which is species in here. So in this case, his example, it can be like the limbs versus human body. Another example that comes to my mind is a single stone versus a wall versus a house. Like, a house is made up of stones, but there are much more in a house than a stone, although it only consists of stones. So there's a new layer of manifestation that you observe. So this is what I understood from Birkan's explanation, saying that when we look at species, we observe divine unity in a different way, which we do not observe in particles or living beings individually.
But of course, it doesn't mean that you cannot observe divine unity when you look at the individuals. You do observe divine unity. So maybe I'm getting wrong, but Nazmum. So the point is not saying that to reach divine unity, you have to see the bigger picture or you have to see the entire universe as a whole. It's not the point at all. Like you see different aspects or different manifestations of the divine unity at different scales, at different levels. Even when you look at a single atom, you see flashes of divine unity there, which we studied in previous flashes and proofs in the first station. So even individual atom will tell you about divine unity in one way. But when you look at the molecules, not just an atom, you will learn about the divine unity in another way, on top of what you see from a single atom. So as you go upper, as you have a bigger picture, let's say, you see another kind of manifestation of divine unity. So that's the point. And connecting with what Muhammad said, I think like there is no end to it. You can always get a bigger picture, and at every level, you will find something else that you wouldn't find when you look at individuals.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, that makes sense.
Okay, Jazakallah khair for the comment and opening up the discussion. So anyone else who wants to help us to understand some points? Otherwise, we can read from the second paragraph and then continue. Abdurrahman, since you are here now, can you read the second paragraph for us, please? And then you can lead the discussion of the second paragraph. Let's have a different person leading discussion with every paragraph, every different paragraph. Is it okay?
No.
Okay,
I'll read it,
let's go.
And then we'll negotiate later. For example, and God's is the highest similitude. By showing the sun's light and reflection.
Oh.
Am I on the wrong flash?
Yes. Okay, you can wait for it.
Which flash are we on?
316 page.
I was wondering what you guys are talking about. Never mind.
He arrived late, so it's normal. 316 since
Okay.
the countless fruits of.
Okay, take two. Since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, the difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. Since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. It is so easy the numerous fruits raised become equal to a single fruit. That means in regard to quantity, multiplicity, and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty. That means in regard to quantity, multiplicity, and numerous, quantity, multiplicity, and numerous centers necessitate the difficulty, expense, and equipment of the whole tree for a single fruit. The difference is only in regard to quality. Like all the factories for the whole army are necessary to manufacture all the military equipment necessary for a single soldier. That is to say, if the matter passes from unity to multiplicity, in respect of quantity, the difficulties increase to the number of individuals. Thus, the extraordinary ease to be seen clearly in all species is the result of the ease and facility arising from unity. Okay. What do you want me to go sentence by sentence?
however you like. You are the moderator.
I don't know how to moderate. Okay.
Just ask other people. You know,
What's going on, dude? Okay, I'll just start from the sentence and just go. From the first sentence, since the countless fruits of a fruit-bearing tree are administered from one center in accordance with one law and a single way of raising, the difficulty, hardship, and expense are transformed into ease. So my question to you is, do you think it's easier for one tree, like one source, to create all the fruits than, I don't know, the tree or the fruits coming from different sources? Do you agree with this logic?
That's a question to everyone, right?
No, that's a question to you. Because it's not immediately obvious to me why it would be so true.
You want my honest opinion?
I want your opinion, yes.
I understood nothing from this ninth flash. I'm not joking, I'm serious.
Never mind that.
I couldn't get the main theme of the ninth flash.
Maybe
Brother Yusuf understood something. No?
Faria wants to say something if you let her.
Yes, please save us.
Go ahead, please, Faria.
Okay, so before tackling Abdurrahman's question, so I'm more interested in knowing what does the author mean by presenting this case to us. I mean, it seems, I want to understand in terms of how I observe the universe. So he's presenting something like when I observe a tree that has countless fruits, then I don't know, like I'm concluding that it's coming from like a, what do you say, a central power supply, right? That everything is coming from like one power supply, like, and then he's mentioning in accordance with one law and a single way of raising. So let me start a little bit backwards. So single way of raising, maybe that can refer to the order that I observe. So a seed, cultivated, water, sunlight, plant, right? In accordance with one law. So maybe that's referring to, you know, the only order that I observe in creation as far as for something to come into existence. And so if I observe just one way of raising, just one order, you know, that you follow, and that may seem like one center, administered from one center. I'm still a little unclear on that. But then if I can see that everything is coming from one center, then obviously what the author is saying, that there won't be any hardship or difficulty as to executing the result or bringing the result into existence. Yeah, so that was just my thoughts on this. And so I wanted to see how everybody else understood what the author is presenting here in this first sentence of this second paragraph.
Suhail, please go ahead.
What I understood from the ninth flash is really the fundamental nature of unity within multiplicity. In that, for example, if you are manufacturing something, so you're a carpenter, you can make the same table multiple times with a unique, you know, wood, legs, design, and every table is in a sense like has the same principles that you made it with. For example, they all have certain design form. So you make tables with a certain design, with a certain type of wood, with a certain type of stain, certain size, height, dimension, shape. And making one table is as easy as making all of them for you, because they all come from the same law of making tables that you sort of determined. Or in other words, you know what the order is for making the table that you make, and therefore not only can you make one of those, you can make as many as you want. Whereas if one were to say, I see 3 tables, they all look the same and function the same. They have the same, made of the same wood. The dimensions are the same, designs the same, the colors the same. What he's saying is if I attribute them to 3 different carpenters, that is infinitely more difficult to do than to attribute it to one carpenter. Because what you would be saying is that the order is known to all 3 carpenters at once, and they can do it, they can make those tables with ease. But what Nursi is saying is that if you look at a tree, whether it has 1 fruit or 100 fruit, 1 fruit is as easy for its maker to make as all of its fruits on there, because they all follow the same principles in how they exist. You know, they all demonstrate the same names. The name of fashioner, the name of designer, the name of all-powerful, all-knowing, all-wise. So you can't, I mean, that, so to say that all fruits come from unique makers that are not the same, you would be assigning it an impossibility existentially. It doesn't make any sense to do so. Because if you were to do so, as he says, not even the tree would exist. If you had 1 fruit from one maker and another fruit from another maker and the tree from another maker, you would have to question how any of it exists, because they're all following the same order. They don't contradict one another. As he says, the difference is only in regard to quality, in that things are different. So for example, 2 fruits, 2 apples from the same apple tree may look slightly different, maybe taste a little different, but they still follow the same order. They come from the same tree, which comes from a seed planted in the soil on the earth that needs water and sunlight. Otherwise, if you say the tree is doing it, you are saying every part of the tree is necessary to bring 1 fruit into existence. And only 1 fruit, all its other fruits. Because there are numerous sort of parts of a tree. There are its roots, its trunk, its branches, its leaves, the sunlight, the earth, the soil. You would be attributing partners ad infinitum. That's an impossibility. You would reach no end to the number of partners you need to attribute for 1 fruit. But he's saying it's easier because it's true. You attribute 1 fruit along with all other fruits to a single maker. That's why, because you observe 1 fruit along with all other fruits come into existence with absolute ease, without difficulty. Therefore, they look to 1 maker.
Jazakallah khair. And Nazmul, please go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question for Brother Suhail. Could you explain again what you mean by ease? Because I'm still a little confused with that.
So ease is, to me, other people can chime in, but what I understand from ease is that, does anyone see any delay in a fruit being given existence? So a tree is planted and it grows moment by moment from sapling to a small tree to a larger tree. But there's no sort of delay in it being given existence. You know, I observe things, you know, developing in quote unquote time, but I can't say that there is some sort of hardship. I don't observe any hardship in a fruit being given existence. You know, I don't really see someone like toiling with such difficulty to bring 1 fruit into existence. I don't see any toil happening, some hardship being taken on by the maker. It just happens to be. Whatever shape it's in, whether it's an unripe fruit or then it becomes ripened, no matter what stage it's in, it just happens to exist as it is at that moment. without any difficulty in coming into existence. Whereas I, unlike a source of existence, I have to toil. I think the best example would be, an analogy would be, a manufacturer, as he says, a manufacturer who's able to mass produce one object, let's say a table, innumerable amount of times without any difficulty. They can just produce it, keep producing it without any delay, without any problems. That's what I observe in the universe. There's no difficulty in making anything what I mean by making, by coming into existence. None whatsoever. As he says, absolute ease. When I understand from absolute ease, in that there is absolutely no difficulty for it to come into existence. None whatsoever, zero. And for that to be the case, it must be because of an absolute source. Otherwise, how is it absolutely easy or without difficulty for something to come into existence? It can only be from an absolute source of existence.
So is it sort of, I guess an analogy could be that if you're trying to, like, let's say you're trying to keep like something floating, right? And so you're constantly blowing under it to keep it afloat. So this would consist of, being difficult for you to keep that piece of paper or whatever it is afloat in the same place. And it's being difficult for you to maintain that state. Whereas with the apple, like you mentioned, there's absolutely no resistance whatsoever. If the right conditions are met, then an apple's just produced, and really nothing can stop that. Is that sort of what he's getting at here?
Yeah. What I would say, what I would add to that, in that, for example, like a common example is that a duck is floating on water, but if you actually look at it, it is moving its feet rapidly underwater. It's having to toil or make difficult work for it just to float on water. That's toil, that's hard work. Whereas an opposite would be, the analogy has limitations, but the opposite would be some manufacturer is able to mass produce a product innumerable amount of times. It just keeps going and going and going, able to produce as many as they want to. Whereas, as you said in the example of an apple, if the right conditions are met, but those conditions are set by him, it's not like he's following his conditions imposed on him. He sets the conditions that must be met for an apple to come into existence. And as those conditions are met, they come into existence. It just happens to be. There's no resistance to it, nor is there any sort of difficulty, because if it was difficult, as Nursi says, you wouldn't even have one apple. You wouldn't even have a single fruit if it was that difficult to come into existence. If it was even one atom's weight of difficulty to come into existence, you wouldn't have any fruit, let alone the tree. In the conclusion, he says, we would not even have a single pomegranate to eat, even if we gave the whole world for it. It would be impossible. So the fact that you don't even need an infinite number, an innumerable amount of fruit, you just need one fruit. And the fact that you have one fruit tells you that it was absolutely easy for it to come into existence because it was from an absolute source of existence. If there was any difficulty in just bringing one fruit into existence, no fruit would exist, because then he couldn't bring anything into existence to begin with.
Jazakallah khair, there are some comments I'd like to read. Hatice Beyza, she says, even if the right conditions are not met, even if the right conditions are not met, the rotting of the apple still follows the order perfectly. And then she continues, or non-growth of the apple, whatever the case may be. So whatever you think in the creation, she says, it would follow the perfect order, and you will see an ease in it, she says. Oh, so I'm looking at Abdurrahman's face, and I sense that he's still not satisfied with this ease, but I might be wrong.
I'm just thinking, because this isn't how we experience life, right? If you wanted to build, if there was an amazing builder, architect, and he wanted to build many buildings, he wouldn't do it himself. It wouldn't be easy for him to do it himself. He'd hire apprentices and teach them and then build many buildings. That's what I experience in life.
Just opposite.
Just the opposite. It's very clearly we experience that. So just trying to understand this, like so far what I understand is we've already concluded that a particle or one thing cannot be doing something. I guess now we're saying, let's assume it could do something. It could build. But then if all these fruits, they were building them separately, then that means that there would have to be many factories. Each one of them would have to be a factory. Like each tree would have to be its own factory, a separate factory. And imagine like millions of trees, billions of trees maybe, how difficult such a thing is. Like you have to imagine a billion factories that are working. And apparently this is something that's not easy to believe in for some people, I guess. Though for me, I'm not sure why. So yeah, that's just my thoughts.
Just to add to Abdurrahman's question or comment. So like, is it what the, especially in the example, is it what the premise is that in our experience, if you want to do something more than one or many, then our experience is that we need help to be able to get or produce something like more than just one. But when you look at the creation itself, in the example talks about the tree and the fruits of the tree. What we experience is like they all come to existence at the same time with no difficulty. And from that concludes that since there is an ease, it must be done by only one. And how is that connected to my other experience? I'm not really clear with that either.
How it's not, how
that like tree example is connected to the, let's say in the text, the factory example.
Yusuf?
I have other comments. I don't have questions. You have answered.
So is it comments about ease? And what does it mean? Like it's seeing the creation ease? Okay. Let's finish this if you don't mind. So the way I understand is like first thing when he talks about the ease in the creation, at least to me, he's not talking about how creator easily doing it. Because it would be just, I don't know, like I have no idea whether he's in pain or, doing it. Sorry?
Sweating.
Sweating, yes. Trying to, oh yeah, another fruit I have to create. So I think is like from my perspective, I see something wonderful being created, and I cannot understand how it is being created just in front of me. It's just in front of me, just in this moment, very moment. This is what he means with ease. Like I will show you something, like in front of you, for instance, I will draw something, an art piece, so wonderful, and you will say, like, I cannot believe this, like how he can produce this artwork so easily. So this is your perception, is your attitude against the wonder of the creation. You see a flower, when you look at carefully, you say this is magnificent. Like other day, we were looking at a hummingbird, which had all possible colors that you can imagine. Just one single hummingbird, and every time she moves, the colors are changing. So for me, like it's impossible, but it's happening in front of me. So the contrast between the magnificence of the thing that exists in front of me and the fact that it really exists in front of me, this is what I call as ease. I don't understand how he can create such a thing right now. Like even watching it, blows my mind, but he creates it just in this very moment. So this is what I understand from ease. And what I understand from things getting easier when I attributed the same source. He says if you try to attribute all these fruits to different laws, different mechanisms, whatever, it will become difficult. But because they are administered from one center according to one law, it becomes easy. He says, right? Again, this is from my perspective, as far as I understand. When I look at all these fruits and assume that there is one single law behind all of them, makes it more easily, for me, more easy to follow. And this is the crux of the science. You assume there is a universality in things. Whatever rules governs, what happens in this part of the room, is exactly the same set of rules when you look at the other part of the room. Same gravity, same, I don't know, the properties of the air and so on. It will be same there. Otherwise, I wouldn't understand anything. It would be a complete chaos for me. But because everything goes to a universality, a single, as he says, one law, he defines law of a different way, not a natural law, but he says law of, what is it, Vahide, I guess, or Rububiye, maybe he says in the text. But anyway, when I assume that things are universal, like it has something universal beyond them, they look at the same source, it becomes easy for me to understand, to follow. Otherwise, I have to imagine for each individual fruit, I have to imagine a completely different set of mechanisms running there. And I wouldn't make sense any of it. And also, going back to the example that, is it you or Osmond said, when we want to do something, we get help. We make the division of the labor. When we look at the creation, we see that it's not possible, because even if you try to divide the labor, for each portion you have to attribute the divinity. Let's say I say, okay, I will create this part of the room. These 3 atoms I will create, the other 3 atoms you create. But we studied before that even to create one atom, I have to have these qualities to create entire universe. So when it comes to creation, when it comes to existence, there's no such thing as division of labor. It's not possible. All you can do, just multiply the divinity, which brings difficulty, not ease. So this is what I understand. Yeah, makes sense. Oh, Suhail, you raising your hand, please go ahead while Yusuf thinking about his comments.
Several things. One, to Osman and Abdul Rahman's point, what is the point of my experience? The point of my experience is to see that ease is in one respect, ease is possible for example, and if I'm able to mass produce something, I can see, like Norsi points out within the words, the role of the self, ana, the nefs. I can build a building to gather an idea, to get some notion that there must be a builder to the universe, a one who constructs the universe. My building doesn't mean I give the building existence. I just rearrange the parts in the universe. I just rearrange little atoms, particles to give a building. I don't give it existence. That's the limitation of the analogy, but it's to give me an idea that there is a builder. That's how I get a notion about somebody designing or constructing something. That's a human being. Likewise, I get the notion or idea if I'm able to do something repeatedly with such ease. For example, if I'm a cook and I'm able to make the same dish multiple times, I'm able to do it with such ease because I know it so well. I'm not saying I give it existence, but what I'm saying is I can now grasp the notion about giving existence with absolute ease because I can see it realized in my life. On the other hand, counterexample, if I find something difficult to do, I'm bad at cooking and I don't know how to cook, and I find even making one dish difficult, let alone the same dish multiple times, let alone other different dishes, then it also exposes me to the impotence and powerlessness of myself. Just like the tree demonstrates its own impetus and powerlessness in making one fruit, because it doesn't have any power to even make one fruit. No knowledge to make one fruit, no will to make one fruit. How can it make all of its fruits if it can't make one fruit? So it's in both respects. One, to comprehend what ease is, and the other to comprehend my powerlessness and impotence. The second point I wanted to make was, while I don't disagree with Birkan in that attributing things to a single maker is easy because it makes rational sense, it's necessary, I will disagree in that, to me, Norsi is saying, you observe things being given existence with such, as he says, the observable absolute ease and lack of difficulty require, indeed necessitate, that they are the works of one maker. I don't have to observe the manufacturer making 1,000 tables, but the fact that I observe 1,000 tables, and as Osmond pointed out, let's say those 1,000 tables all are manufactured within a short time frame, or in the example of the universe, all fruits of a tree are brought into existence at the same time, then I know the manufacturer manufactures with absolute ease, not absolute ease, but the manufacturer manufactures with such ease that I don't possess. Likewise, if I see one fruit along with all other fruits being given existence at the same time, I know the one who gives it existence must be doing so with absolute ease, as in there is no difficulty in doing so. Yes, it's easy for me to attribute all those fruits to one single maker, but likewise, I infer that therefore he must be absolute, which means it must be absolutely easy for him to give something into existence because of what I observe, the observables. That's how I make a conclusion. That's how I know they must be the work of a single maker, of one maker. Otherwise, as he says, difficulty rising to the degree of impossibility. It would be impossible for a tree to make one fruit, let alone all its fruits. And therefore, he says, would doom the genus and the species to non-existence. It wouldn't even exist because it can't even make one fruit, let alone all of them. There would be no tree and there would be no fruit.
Jazakallah khair. Let's hear Yusuf and then Nazwan remark.
I was comparing this ninth flash with fifth flash. In fifth flash, he was talking about handwritten letters and comparing it to a printing press. And he was saying that since every letter is unique, it makes more sense to attribute every letter to a hand which writes it directly instead of saying that for each letter there is a printing press, because it would be unnecessary complexity that I would like to say. For each letter, I will require a unique printing press. This was the example that he gave when he was paying attention to every being in existence being unique. Now that we are investigating the species, comes the commonness among the things. So when it comes to the common aspect of the things, now he says, again, it makes more sense for them to come from a single hand. Now, going with the fifth flash, it would make sense to say that, well, now at least in this case, printing press would make more sense. And he says, no, again, still it makes more sense for them to come from a single source because of their similarity. And this, otherwise, every individual is needed to be as complex as the species. So I was just trying to compare the two. I guess it's not a complete comment, but I'm trying to see the difference or parallelism between the two. Is one contradicting the other or not?
So in the one, we see the flash of divine unity within the multiplicity, like all these different things coming to existence points to divine unity. And now he's talking about, I'm just repeating what you said. Now he's talking about similar things coming to existence. And this time similarity points to divine unity. Okay, National, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna comment that I think I'm sort of getting it now a little bit better. So not only the fact that, say, like the species has similarities, but also it's the sheer size or the sheer number of those things that are coming into being all at the same time, that you could see that it's very easy, right? So for example, if something was really hard, let's say Brother Sohail, he talked about cooking. So if it's really hard for me to make pound cake, it's going to take me several hours to make pound cake, right? And it'll take me a lot of effort and a lot of planning and so on and so forth. But if I'm an expert at, if I'm a chef, then, you could slice a fish in very little time. You could create meals, very world-class meals in very little time, and you're producing them constantly, right? And you're producing them under pressure, you're producing them 10 hours a day, and it seems very easy to whoever's looking, right? So I think it's just a sheer number of unique things in the universe that are coming into being that display, how easy it is for whoever's creating it. Because if it wasn't easy, then you wouldn't have this almost effortless type of creation, right? Whether at the very small level of, atoms colliding into each other and, creating new particles, or at the galactic level where, entire galaxies are created. And, if you're looking back, it looks quite easy. In a sense, because if it follows this law, then this happens, right? And it always happens like that. So I guess just the sheer number of things that are coming into being shows that it's quite easy. I don't know if is that sort of what you guys are getting at.
So Hill says something. He says yes. Okay, as a representative of the group. So that means yes. He adds, he says, but I wouldn't use the word to create for things in the universe. That is. So he wouldn't use the word to create. Azmi, would you like to take the lead in the next paragraph? It's a small one. Then Yusuf, would you like to?
In short, the conformity and similarity in basic numbers between all the individuals of a species and all the species of a genus prove that they are the works of a single maker, because the unity of the pen and oneness of the seal requires this. Similarly, observable absolute ease and lack of difficulty require, indeed necessitate, that they are the works of one maker. Otherwise, difficulties rising to the degree of impossibility would doom the genus and the species to non-existence. So, now that it looks like it is actually the same line of thought with the fifth flesh. In there, he was talking about this every individual letter being unique, but in here he's saying that still they are unique in details, but also they resemble each other to a large extent. So they should be coming from the single hand. Otherwise, you will, whatever you see in the existence, because in the first one, when it comes to uniqueness, the impossibility was in that for everything, whoever is the maker of everything needs to know everything. So for making a single letter, you have to have the knowledge of everything. But still you are going to just write a single letter. Still the same thing goes on in here. You are going to, in order to create a species, the knowledge, the qualities that are required will be required for a single creature of that species as well. So instead of saying that there is a one maker who makes this whole species, if you say that no, every single individual is being made individually, then the same impossibility as in fifth flesh happens in here. But now the author says, well, you wouldn't observe the similarity in this case, because species means there is a similarity between them. So if now I attribute everything to different agents, they need to know everything, they need to have power to make everything in this existence, yet they were going to make a single one. And now I'm imagining, or which requires that still there are going to be overlapping or similarities, so much so that there's going to be the order within a species. This is why I guess he says, otherwise difficulties rising to the degree of impossibility would doom the genus and the species to non-existence.
So, if I'm getting right, creating just one individual was already impossible. It requires the knowledge of everything, the power of like infinite power and so on. You're saying that let's assume, we have something like this, but at least, but at the end, we wouldn't have any similarity between them. We're not only having these individuals, which are already magnificent by themselves, but on top of them, we also have these commonalities between them, which is another layer of impossibility. Because this commonalities with the species means there's an order. Now I need to imagine this level of order being maintained by independent agents. Because in the fifth flesh, the impossibility was every single one of them is unique, which means that in order to make one of them, you need to know all of them, so that every single one of them is still unique. Now, in this ninth flesh, we are talking about commonalities across species. So still you are going to put some sort of a commonality, but this commonality is going to be driven by individual agents, not from an all-knowing, all-seeing, like somebody who's looking from top, from a bird's eye view. But instead, every individual is going to foresee what this species is going to look like and act accordingly. So there wouldn't, making a species is going to be compounded, impossibilities would come into the picture.
In this paragraph, does it also say that, or maybe, I'm not sure if I'm misinterpreting it, since there is an ease, it must come from one source, and for something like gradual or having different layers or levels, that can be only true for us, for human beings, because we are created beings and we are, in terms of, let's say, our powers, like in quotation marks, since we don't possess that kind of powers, everything is gradual for us. If there is something hard, more difficult, less difficult, so we can speak different levels for us. But since there is an ease that you experience in the creation, how they come into existence, and in this specific example, in the example of the species, that proves that it must come from one source, and that one source must be absolute, because you cannot speak, no matter how many, in terms of the number, how many different individuals you are talking about in relation to an absolute. You cannot speak of any kind of gradual, like, or any kind of levels of difficulty. So in other words, since there is an ease, and from my own experience, I know that, like, when the number increases, I am not able to, like, maintain the same level. For example, like making one chair versus like 1,000 chairs, I require, like, help from the others. That is not something that you experience in the creation itself. So since there is such an ease that they are coming into existence, that is another evidence. Just easing, like, ease itself is another evidence for him being an absolute creator. Because you can, for an absolute, you cannot speak of any kind of level of difficulty.
Any points from this side of the room? Ladies, any comment? So I see Suhail raising hand. Just before that, Suhail, I just want to reiterate what Yusuf said. That's what I understand from it, because I think it's really important. So we look at the things and we see all this similarity. We, for instance, just the author says, similarity in basic members between all the individuals of a species. We look at the individual members of a species, and we see all these similarities. We look at the birds, for instance, they all have similar wing structure. Like, they all have wings. Maybe different shapes, but wing is common, having wings. Having two legs, common. What is it?
Beak.
Beak. Like, we see a common structure, similarity. And then we look at the genus. Genus?
Sure. I don't know.
Okay.
Genus, I don't know.
Like, these species come together, define a genus, and we see similarities at this level as well. So when we see this similarity, some people, no need to give the name, say, oh, you see, because there are all these similarities, there's no complexity at all, everything is, so easy to explain. I take a creation existence a few millions years back, one cell becomes, more organized entity, and then becomes another level of entity and human, the evolution. So because of this similarity, they say, oh, there's nothing surprising there. But Otto said just the opposite. He says, if you look at the individuals, just creating the individuals itself, just one bird, it's already impossible from your perspective. And now on top of it, you also see commonalities between different birds. The source is not giving existence only just one bird and stop there. but gives existence all these birds that you see, and he also puts a common law among them. So similarity we see between birds within a species or genus is another level of difficulty from our perspective again. It's another thing to be surprised with, another reason to be surprised. Just seeing a bird itself, it's already surprising, and then you see another bird and you see commonalities between them. That's another reason to think about, to contemplate.
Actually, it is really interesting, because if you don't take this unity perspective, then you have to go with multiplicity. But multiplicity does not end, which is a problem. Like let's say you take the particle atom, but you cannot stop there. You need to go even deeper to whatever is, and bringing two of them together, if you start assuming some sort of an identity for these two things coming together and making a one, like two particles coming together and making a molecule, whatever, but you know that it's not a single entity, it's consisting of simple particles. So a simple thing needs to be the agent. So what we are talking about a species, which is a way far away from these simple single entities. So to whom shall I attribute this, what I observe in this multiplicity? This is where the toughness of the problem is coming from. Because I am thinking about the same problem when it comes to humans' consciousness or perception. Because when I say I see you, I'm not meaning that my particle over here sees you. I mean I, as a single entity, see you. But if I am a single entity, which of the things in here is a single entity? I am consisting of so many particles or so many small agents. So attributing this single entity to one of them doesn't make sense. So in here now we are trying to attribute making of species, since we cannot attribute it to a whole, because attributing it to a whole requires unity. Since we are going to escape from it, then we have to attribute it to whatever we can imagine as the smallest particle or smallest entity in this existence, which is becoming so far and so impossible to handle this similarity in existence. This is why author is saying that every single one of them needs to have all the factories to make one fruit. Because we cannot think of or imagine of any commonality.
Sunil, sorry for making you wait, but go ahead, please.
I think the way Nursi puts it, you don't have to really think, not that it doesn't require deep thought, that you can't think about it deeply, but it's so obvious that you can ask a child and it's obvious that things must come from a single maker. It's that obvious. Just intuition says it must be that way. But forget about how you reason, but there's the idea that it could be anything else is ridiculous. And the reason for that is because, as Nursi says, the genus would cease to be. It's so impossible, it would doom the genus and species to non-existence. For if the tree really was the cause of the fruit it bears, then it should live in perpetuity. It shouldn't die. The fact that things can go extinct, the fact that things can die and cease to be, shows that it's impossible for them to give one of their fruit its existence, let alone all of them. It doesn't make any sense. How is it possible for something that can't even sustain itself? For example, if you use a parent and their children, it's obvious to the child that, okay, yes, the parent may have several children, two parents, but if they die, what power do they really have? Nothing. They don't have any power, knowledge, or will to have given them existence, to create them, let alone multiple individuals from the same womb. It's that obvious.
Jazakallah khair. So one of our friends here had a baby recently. So Suhail is saying that just because you had a baby, don't think you live forever. You will die.
And actually, it's funny. During the weekend, I was having a conversation with a grown-up child, and to this specific child, in her childhood, I asked the question. She was not going to primary school, maybe age 5 or younger. We were at a garden. I said, "Look, they say that you see this flower. They say Earth makes it." She said, "This is very funny. You're making joke." And I said, "Even further, they say the sun is making it." She again laughed and said, "This is very funny. Are you joking?" Whatever, with her childish tone. Now that the same girl is in high school, we were having a conversation, and our topic of our conversation was, does spirit exist? And I was asking, how about your conscious experiences? And she says, well, I think it is hormones. I think it's neural science. And I reminded her of her childhood, saying that it was so ridiculous for you back in the day when you were not like occupied with this hormones or neurotransmission, whatever. So it was an interesting experience. Since now Suhail brought up saying that for a child it's going to sound ridiculous. Yes, it does sound ridiculous for a child, but grown-ups are more childish than children, right?
Okay, let's finish with the last paragraph, inshallah. Hatice, would you like to lead the discussion with the third paragraph, the last one, since everyone leading another paragraph?
I can read it, inshallah. Okay, so to conclude, if all things are ascribed to Almighty God, they become an easy as a single thing, while if they are attributed to causes, they become as difficult as everything. Since it is thus, the extraordinary profusion observed in the universe and the boundless abundance before our eyes display a stamp of unity like the sun. Since it is thus, the extraordinary profusion observed in the universe and the boundless abundance before our eyes display a stamp of unity like the sun. If these fruits which we obtain in such plenty were not the property of the single one of unity, we would not have a single pomegranate to eat, even if we had the whole world for it. Yeah, I mean, as the paragraph begins, it is a conclusion, a kind of tying in the main idea of the entire ninth flash here. But I guess one thing that's been on my mind is, and I know we kind of discussed it, but still it hasn't quite settled in. I guess from my perspective, to see something coming into existence with ease, or that again, for something to come into existence easily or more difficult, or in a more difficult manner, is from my perspective, because for me something can be easier or more difficult as opposed to an absolute one. There is no degree of difficulty or ease, in the sense that one thing is easier than another, or one thing is more difficult than another. But I guess I was just trying to just think about how my observation of things coming into existence in such balance and ease and order and delicacy and very preciseness,
with the child example too, it doesn't make sense to attribute everything to itself, so everything kind of working together, or everything, even just for a moment of existence, if we were to think of like just a frame of a film, if you will, just to bring like just a moment of existence into existence, would require so like infinite amount of creators, for example, to be working together simultaneously in perfect harmony, in such a way where they're completely aware of one another and each other, not overthrowing one another. And this is contrary to logic, I guess. But I was wondering, I don't know, again, just like, does the ease that I observe in and of itself, is that enough of a like, to what extent can I use this as proof, and to what extent is this like wishful thinking, or just kind of like just making an I don't know how to word it, like kind of trying to I'm not going to say force, but I don't know, just I guess like can the fact that, or can my observation that things are coming into existence in such an easy manner by itself point to such a source of existence that must be absolute? Or is it more like keeping in mind, I guess this is the ninth flash to something, like there is some foundations or other things that we've been also discussing. I don't know, I'm just going to throw that out there. And if anyone wants to get at it or have any comments or questions. Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
Well, I'm not sure what seeing things being given existence and done with such absolute ease, as he says, that's observable. I'm not sure what's wishful about that. I've just observed. That's just what I observe. Things come into existence. They just happen to be, and there's no difficulty for them existing, and they exist so easily. I have to ask the question how, and therefore they must come from a single absolute source, single maker, one maker. That's my conclusion. But what I observe is that there is no difficulty in something coming into existence. That's an observation I make. It's not. I'm not forcing something onto the universe saying, "Oh, things exist and they exist easily." That's just the fact they exist means they exist easily, in a sense, because they all exist at the same time. The tree and all its fruits, along with the entire cosmos, at the same time. How can somebody say things don't obviously exist with such absolute ease? I don't know how that's a contradiction of reality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure what it would mean for something to exist with non-ease or without ease, because I can't even think of an example really, but because that's not really something that I observe. But I guess like after your comment, like when I look at, let's say, a moment of existence, perhaps because of the fact that everything in that moment, again, like a frame, if you will, is being brought into existence with ease and order and balance and precision, that because all of these things are infinite to me, right? And these are all like all these adjectives that I use to describe it from my perspective, but they're infinite to me, right? I can go to the macro, to the micro. I can divide things up in a way, and they're like, you can keep dividing and dividing and dividing. And in that sense, I guess because they're innumerable, I can't put a number on it. Then it must look to the absolute. Otherwise, this example won't even make sense. But if only 10 things were being brought into existence with ease, that would, in a way, it doesn't even make sense to the example is a contradiction. But please go ahead.
Does it really matter if you observe if there's only one thing, one particle in existence, or a billion, trillion particles in existence? Just for one particle to exist, you observe that it must exist. It's obviously easy for it to exist. Otherwise, how does it exist? Like, what I'm trying to say is that it's implicit for when something exists, it's easy for it to exist. Otherwise, how does it exist? If it was difficult for it to exist, it wouldn't even exist for one moment. Because for something to exist, it would be existent from the void, from nothing, in a sense. How does something come into existence from the void if it was difficult? By one iota, it wouldn't even exist. It has to overcome the void for it to exist. Like, you just need one particle. Now, the fact that I observe not infinite, but innumerable amount of things existing at the same time, each one is an individual evidence, and then collectively an evidence that the one who brings it into existence must be absolute, definitely. Because if you talk about one thing, you're talking about all things. And if you're talking about all things, you're talking about one thing. So you talk about one fruit, you're talking about all the fruits of the tree. Because if you say one fruit, well, it did it itself, it brought it into existence, and you're saying all fruits did it on their own. Because then what's the difference between one fruit and all other fruits? Nothing. But if you say one fruit couldn't do it, then none of the fruits could do it. The tree couldn't give life, give reality to any of the fruits, let alone one. So they all must come from a single maker.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess what's kind of throwing me off here is the word like easily, because I guess when I say that something is brought into existence easily, it must be from my perspective. Whereas bringing something from non-existence to existence, from God's perspective, if you will, like I can't say it's more easy or difficult or something. I can only speak on behalf of what I observed. So that's maybe what was kind of...
That's why he says absolute ease. He doesn't say ease. I know what you're saying, like there's degrees of easiness and difficulty, but he's saying absolute ease, meaning that's incomprehensible. I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
But I can observe it, but I can't tell you what it is. Like in the way Birkan was saying, I don't really know how he gives existence to anything, but I know I can't do it, and the tree can't do it, and the fruits can't do it. Nothing can do it. It is absolutely easy. It's an ease beyond human comprehension. I don't even know what that is. I can kind of perceive some idea of it by, let's say, like what he said, the example of like a manufacturer producing innumerable copies of a thing. I can kind of imagine it in a way to some degree. Like I can try to get there, but I can't really imagine it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because even like in the mass production of any object or whatever product, there's still energy that one puts in order to produce it. Also, it might be easier to mass produce one object as opposed to produce many individual unique objects. But yeah, I guess as close as you can get within with examples limited to the bounds of the universe. Thank you. Go ahead, Brother Muhammad Said.
The last paragraph you read, causes versus an absolute maker. it I would like to share my understanding of this last paragraph by using an example of human species, and as it is pointed out before, the similarity in human species. Like, if I ask, why the people look like similar, let's say the answer is because their mouth is is on their head, or their nose is located on their head, and that's why it looks similar. Like, this approach is assuming that the mouth and the nose are located there by itself, and as a result we see similarity. I think when the author says causes, it is highlighting this point that if the similarity is necessitates a work, necessitates a production, or some kind of R&D, let's say, similarity, in order to have a similarity between the things, and the positioning of the parts are in need of the same process. It cannot be like a fruit on a tree. If a fruit on a tree is referred to, the existence of a fruit is referred to the system on the body of a tree, it assumes that the apple or the fruit needs to be made, but not the system of the body of the tree, of the body. It is not in need of a process, as if like, or by yes, this is the production and this is the producer, it says. But the reality of the existence, everything needs to be produced at one time, because there is it doesn't make sense, because all of them are here at the same time, and all of them are like the example of a tree I would like to use it. All the components, the parts of a tree, including the fruit, are there at one time, and they are all subject to the same question at the same time. So by referring the fruit to a tree, we assume, or this person assumes, that something needs to be produced and the other one doesn't have to be produced. It is the producer, but in reality they are all the same. They are all subject to the same question to ask, how come it is, for example, the system of a tree in the body of a tree, like questioning the fruit of a tree, it can be the same, that system can be questioned in the same way, saying that how come it is here. And so I think that's why it is inseparable, in that sense, that everything is in need of, it needs to be produced at the same time. That's why an absolute, which means a source which is not of the universe as a whole, has to be the maker, has to be the producer, has to be the source of the quality of the similarity, or the quality of the multiplicity. Each of them as a quality needs to be produced like the garment of a soldier, each of the unit, each of the part of his clothes and his gun, rifle, whatever, they are all need to be made in order for that soldier to be completed. So each of the part is subject to the same question. It cannot be referred to the other part of the garment of the soldier.
Thank you very much, Mohammed Said. That was a very refreshing point for me now as well, that, you know, everything needs to be produced, I guess, or brought into existence at the same time, because I guess the same qualities necessary to bring into existence the fruit, for example, is also necessary to bring into existence the tree, and these qualities cannot be found within the tree, so I cannot really make that separation. And so one moment of existence does not have the qualities to bring into existence the next moment for me as I experience it. Thank you. Do we have any other questions or final comments that we'd like to make before we close up, inshallah?
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. الفاتحة.